going on, guys? So today we're talking about the top 10 best decks of the new upcoming format. I know! Look at that out the gate. It's starting crazy out the gate. So with number 10 is Madolche. I have a few reasons why I put Madolche at number 10. First off, I think the format's a little loosey-goosey. And that's actually good for Madolche for two reasons. One, I don't think Madolche is that amazing, definitely going to be topping all the time type deck, but I do think that there are a lot of decks that could be considered the 10th best deck of the format. So that's a good thing for Madolche. But number two, whenever Madolche has done its best, has been when the format is loosey-goosey. So this deck is fantastic at going first, can create a crazy first turn board. It's even better at going second. Gamma hurt a little, but they got Herald of Orange Light back, and that was the main reason why I put Madolche here. For me, it was Madolche or Drytron, and Drytron still has cards on the ban list. Madolche does not, and so that's why I put Madolche on here over the top. And a big thing too with Madolche, you'll notice amongst all of these decks, it is the oldest, and I actually think that's starting to play in Madolche's favor a little bit. Like back when Madolche first came out, you had to know what some of these cards do. You had to know, Hoot Cake banishes the special, but if there's no monsters in the graveyard, you can't do its effect, right? You had to know that the Tiramisu, doesn't target, right? But still shuttles back, but it needs cards in the graveyard to do its effect. Well, you don't really know that kind of stuff now. Like, a lot of people don't know that random stuff about Madolche. So, I mean, obviously, if you're good, you should know what just about every deck does, potentially. But Madolche, because it's older, because it's got so much support, it's actually a really good deck at number 10. Coming in at number 9, though, is Mariness. Now, I kind of hinted at this a little bit on the Penny Stock Market Watch, where I asked myself, okay, what is the best deck that didn't get hit, right? Because a lot of the decks that did get hit are still really solid, right? And we'll talk about some of them going forward, but I felt like the best deck that didn't get hit was Mariness. Mariness is still really consistent, and here's the thing too, is they're all Cybers, right? So Cybers is now looking for a new best deck, a new buddy to hang out with, right? But on top of that, Water has a really interesting amount of really good support, with like Moria of Greed, Salvage, obviously. But then also there's, the Atlantean Mermail, Ice Barrier stuff. There's the Ice Jade stuff. There's a lot of different directions you could take. Even the Shark stuff, the new Gishki stuff, right? There's a lot of different directions you could take with Mariness. And it's still such a very powerful deck. And it's another one of those decks that a lot of people don't know a lot about because it's been rogue for so long. So I'd be on the lookout for a deck like Mariness. But coming in at number 8, Bestial Control. I think that's what they're calling it now. It's like Dragon Link, but without the rockets. Listen, I think I've mentioned this before. This deck is always going to be top 10. I don't think you can hit it. I don't think there's enough stuff you can do to Dragon Link or Bestial Control or whatever that could hurt this deck to where it's not good anymore. There's so much light support. There's so much dark support. There's so much dragon support that a light and dark dragon deck is just always going to be good. Here's the thing. You can go back 15 years, and I'm not being hyperbolic when I say 15 years, and you will find a light and dark dragon deck that was one of the best decks of the format. And all throughout the years, it's always been a deck that's kind of just lingered around in the background. But when the Rocket stuff came out, 5-6 years ago, however long the Rocket Rampage structure deck was, it kind of brought Dragon Link to the forefront, and since then it hasn't gone anywhere because there's so much support for dragons, and the Bestial stuff is still really, really good, especially if you run a lighter dark deck. But even if you don't, even if you're running like super heavy Samurai or Mariness like we were just talking about, you're still going to have a tough time against the Dragon Link deck. Now, coming in at number 7 is Sky Striker. If you followed this channel at all for an extended period of time, whenever I do top 10s, number 7, I always, for some reason, I make it a deck that I feel like can either be in the top 5 or not in the top 10 at all. And so that's why I put it at 7. I think to myself, Sky Striker could legitimately be one of the best decks of the format. Gauge is at 2. multi-rolls at 3, right? A lot of the other decks got hurt, right? So that could spell for success. Don't forget, Spellbook of Judgment came back, not on this most recent list, but the list before that, right? So there's a lot, actually, that Sky Striker has at its disposal. But also, this deck is the second oldest deck on this entire list, and it could have gotten Power Crept by now. So even with everything that it got from the ban list, this deck could very easily not be a top 10 deck. But it also could be number 5, and that's why I like to sink it in right here at number 7. Coming in at number 6, it's like Cyber's deck. I've noticed in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, and I actually really like this. And you guys can let me know in the comments down below. Do you like this type of change that we've seen from Yu-Gi-Oh, where, for example, I just posted my B-Trooper deck profile. That deck is running Inzectors, B-Trooper, Battle Wasp, random like the Contact C, Retaliating C, that archetype, and there's just a lot of different insect stuff jumbled together. We're just talking about dragons, right? That's kind of how that deck is. The Infernoble Knights, the Warriors. There's just so many, like Isolde and Neospatian Aqua Dolphin. There's just so much stuff like that. And Cybers has that as well. But the thing is with Cybers is it's a lot of really good stuff where you have Signet Mining, Parallel Exceed, the Code Talker stuff, which is relatively generic, but then you also have archetypes like Mathmech, Adagnister, Salamangreat, and Mariness that are all really, really, really solid with some of the interactions and stuff that those cards can do. Lady Debug is still a card, Flame Buffalo is still a card. There's just so much Cybers stuff, so that's why I have Cybers at number 6. Coming in at number 5 is Pearly. You guys, it's very obvious. I've never been the biggest supporter of Pearly, but results are results, and I don't think the hit was strong enough to take this deck out of the top 5. I think keeping it at 5 feels like a really good spot. I think that a lot of people like how cute the deck is, but I don't know if it's as good as people say, but a 6 material Zeus is really powerful. A card that can draw 2 is unaffected by card effects is insane. But this deck did hurt its consistency a little bit, which is definitely why it's all the way here at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is Sprite. This deck almost makes the list as the best deck to not get hit. And you're actually going to see in a second the main reason I have Sprite here at number 4. Because Sprite, let's be honest, like Sprite is very good, but we see like Sprite, Evil Twin, Sprite, Tri-Brigade, right? Sprite, Gishki. Sprite, Melfi. We've seen Sprite just combined with so many different decks. Like, just as an engine, it feels like Sprite's very, very good. Now, I will say Sprite did actually get an indirect hit because this deck was running 3 copies of Emergency Teleport, 3 copies of Psyframe Gear Gamma. So that was something that was kind of maybe a direct hit to Sprite or maybe just an indirect hit to Sprite, a happy accident. But I think still with that, you still have the Frog package because only Rodent Totem got hit. Which still doesn't make sense to me that Totally Awesome is illegal, but this deck can still do a lot of things, even with both Starter and Elf on the ban list, and now Gamma as well. This is still really good. Now, the best combination, I feel like, for this deck, because I listed off a bunch, is Sprite Runic. And Runic, for me, is the best version of Sprite, and I think that the best version of Runic is also Sprite. Like, so Sprite's best is Runic, Runic's best is Sprite. But Runic is, Runic could potentially be ran with Sky Striker. Runic is a really good rogue, not like rogue, but rogue style, right? Where it interacts with your opponent in so many different ways. It's obviously not as good as it could have been with the Mystic Mine and decking your opponent out interactions, but this deck can still do a lot of crazy things. It lost one of its buddies in Eteria. Maybe you can still run Eteria, right, with 1 Sacred Tree, but probably not. There's a reason why that deck didn't make the list, but I still think Runic is just an absolutely top-tier deck, and a deck that you need to know what it does. You need to know where all the interactions are, where the choke points are, and how to beat it, because it is one of the best decks of the entire format. Coming in at number 2 is Dogmatica Branded. Branded lost its easy win button, but it's still a fantastic archetype. This is another sort of, not like attribute or type, but there's another sort of theme that's always been good. At least since like the Alistair the Invoker stuff and that came out. I think like 10 years ago, maybe not as much, like 8 years ago. Just fusion, right? So there's just so many different things. That's why they run the Fright for Patchworks and the Dark Magicians for the Dragoons. But it's also just Despia is a really good archetype, right? And don't forget Super Poly's at 3, and Super Poly is insane with how many generic fusion monsters that there are. And oh, by the way, like the branded stuff is so, like, Branded Lost is a very underrated card. Branded Fusion is maybe the best fusion spell in the entire game outside of Super Polymerization, and maybe even including Super Polymerization. Being able to send materials from your deck immediately. Guardian Chimera is still a great card. And here's the thing too, they can still do the lock. Like, they can still do the gimmick puppet lock. So that's why I have this deck at number 2. But I do think that this deck gets hard countered and loses to Kashtira. And I think that, listen, I didn't think the Mind Hacker was the way to go. I know a lot of people were talking about Mind Hacker. I didn't think Mind Hacker was the way to go because I felt like, yes, that stops Kashtira from taking the zones away, which is annoying, but it doesn't stop Kashtira from winning. The way Kashtira wins, 1, it can take cards off the top of your deck, right? It can take cards from your extra deck. It can still do that. 2, a walking Macrocosmos, which even though that card went to 1, so it's a little bit easier to deal with, it's still at 1. Like, you're still going to have to see it, which is very, very unfortunate. And this deck is still very consistent. I wish there was a couple more cards in the main deck that they would have hit, or maybe even just Unicorn to 1. But nonetheless, that's why I have Kashtira at number 1. And this is something interesting too. Blaster's a level 7 fire monster. So, is it possible we could see Kashtira run Blaster? I don't know. But let me know what you guys think. What are the best 10 decks in the format that you're looking for? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you guys click that like button to show your support for the channel. Subscribe for more content. But most importantly of all, have a good day.